you come to know all sorts of different things that you wouldn't otherwise know. For example, you won't know that if you hear a firecracker, because even in Hong Kong, sometimes in the remote new territories, you get to play with firecrackers. But you won't know that, when there's a firecracker, somewhere in the distance, your friend from Palestinian fellow student would say, that sounds like an AK-47. That is not something that would ever cross your mind. But at the same time, most of my closer friends are actually Africans, and I realized that social-culturally, they are closer to us. When you are good friends, it is brothers and sisters. It is much like the way Chinese people embrace people outside of the immediate blood family. When they recognize you, they embrace you in the same way. But to this day, my understanding of, say, the more Caucasian cultures, that tends to be less so. I don't think it actually hinders my work because fundamentally, the legal profession exists because there are gray zones. That is a reality. If there's no gray zone, it's absolute right and wrong, you don't need lawyers. So as a matter of fact, black and white doesn't really exist in our world. But also because of that UWC experience, because now you can see that different people looking at the same thing can have a different perspective. Because of where they're standing, the fact of the existence of certain circumstances exist. But where you are standing also colors how you look at certain things, or you perceive or you experience certain things, and you have views. In a way, I'd say on reflection, that whole UWC experience letting me see that things can be all different ways also helps me with my professional practice. One of my second years from Senegal, he runs an NGO. I mean, he actually works in Italy, but he has an NGO that serves back in his hometown in Congo, Senegal. But so he was doing these good things. Then, sometimes we'll talk about how do we help the community. The easy things where money serves is like, okay, I was donating and we were building this facility next to the Mother to Be house, so that and this was meant to be a training facility. So Mother to Be house is right next to a hospital, because in that place, usually the woman gets very pregnant full term and walks to the hospital, which means a lot of complication can happen. So he started off building the first house, with the money raised through his NGO, and he was talking to me about it. And then he said, so these ladies, if they're sitting around waiting for the baby to born, or they're coming to learn about sort of care for themselves and the children, maybe it's a good idea to have a little house next door to do the teaching thing. There is a lot more segregation that we feel. Well, within Hong Kong, we know a few years ago, which is still continuing, it's just that it was not as drastic. The divisiveness within societies, within families, within groups of friends. I mean, we must all come across a person that, when you have the absolute right and absolute wrong, when people are so polarized that they cannot talk. And of course, the UWC thing is like, okay, it is safe to be able to talk and discuss something that we may not agree with, and it is okay to disagree, but I'm open to learning why you think about it that way, or why I think about it that way, and maybe in that midst to give a little bit more understanding and compassion of where each party is coming across, as opposed to saying I have to be right. And if I say that there is something right about you, therefore I'm wrong, because it's not binary like that. Also, in other respects, around the world, of course there is a big drive on diversity, which is a very good thing, as a female. But at the same time, I see that there are pockets of diversity movements. It feels like it becomes more segregated. When my son said to me, because he is half Chinese, half British, and he looks a bit white, and he said, I'm a bit worried if I go out and I try to do, say I feel like doing a Chinese meal, but it might be seen as a cultural hijack because he doesn't look Chinese. But it goes to that sort of situation, it becomes a bit extreme. And you need to have an environment like a UWC where you can have an open discourse about these sort of things.